The night air cuts like a blade wrapped in ice. November cold, the kind that reaches into your lungs and steals your breath before you can exhale. Behind Rossetti's, the upscale Italian restaurant where Dominic Ross's father was murdered 17 years ago by a bullet meant for the old empire, frost glitters on the pavement like crushed glass scattered under the sodium streetlights. The dumpsters stand in a row, massive and dark, casting shadows that swallow everything. The silence is wrong. A man 6'3", broad-shouldered, wearing a black suit that costs more than a year's rent in the neighborhoods he owns, kneels on the frozen ground beside the third dumpster. His hands shake, not from cold, but from something deeper, something that hasn't happened to Dominic Rossi in 15 years. Tears run down his face. His 5-year-old son, Oliver, lies in his arms like a broken doll. The child's skin has turned the color of bruised plums. His lips are blue. His chest is not moving. 40 seconds. The doctors told him Oliver has been without oxygen for 40 seconds. Around him stand 3 physicians from his private payroll, men who have stitched his enemies and his friends with equal precision, and they are frozen. Mouths open. Eyes wide. Useless. His lieutenants Rocco and Sal grip weapons at their sides, muscles taut, but there is no one to shoot, nothing to kill, no enemy that money or power can touch. The most powerful man in Philadelphia is on his knees, and his power means nothing. Dominic's voice breaks like fractured glass. Do something. Do something. Do something. That is when the delivery girl appears. She shoves past the doctors with the force of someone who has nothing left to lose, which is exactly what she is. Valentina Voss, 27 years old, wearing a grease-stained red jacket with the logo of Mario's Pizzeria on the back, a job she started 3 weeks ago for $4.50 an hour, and ripped jeans held together at the seams with safety pins. Her backpack, slung across one shoulder, contains everything she owns in this world. Her hair is pulled back so tight it stretches the skin at her temples. Her face is bone-thin, the kind of thin that comes from choosing between eating and paying for bus fare. But her eyes. Her eyes are dark and burning and absolutely clear. She drops to her knees beside Oliver. She moves with movements sharp and certain, movements that speak of muscle memory, of a knowledge that has been tested before. She rips the child from Dominic's arms, the most powerful man in the city actually lets go, and tilts Oliver's head back with the precision of someone who has done this exact motion 10,000 times in nightmares. Her breath mists in the freezing air as she leans down, seals her mouth over the child's mouth and nose, and breathes. Once. Twice. Then she begins chest compressions, counting aloud so everyone can hear her voice in the silence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Her hands are small but they are driving down with the force of everything she has left in her body. Her ribs must be screaming. Her shoulders must be burning. She does not stop. She does not waver. She breathes and presses and breathes and presses like the rhythm is her heartbeat and Oliver's heart is synchronized to hers. 30 seconds pass. Oliver's body convulses. His back arches. He chokes, a sound like a drowning animal being dragged to shore, and then he screams. He screams and screams and screams, his lungs drawing in air, his skin flooding with color like someone dumping paint into clear water, the blue fading to pink, the pink deepening to red. Life returns to his face like someone turning up the light in a dark room. Dominic collapses forward, catching himself on his palms, his forehead nearly touching the frozen pavement. His shoulders shake. His men have not seen him cry since his father's funeral, and they do not know what to do with this image of the man who controls their entire universe breaking on his knees in front of a dumpster. Valentina stands. She wipes her mouth with the back of her hand. She adjusts her backpack on her shoulder, the gesture so ordinary it feels like a slap. She looks at Dominic for exactly 2 seconds. Just 2 seconds. Then she turns and begins walking away, her footsteps echoing against the brick walls of the alley, the sound of her shoes on the frozen ground the only noise in a space that suddenly feels too small to hold what just happened. He needs a hospital, she says without turning back. Now. That is all she says. That is all she needs to say. But what Valentina did not know was that 3 days earlier, the man kneeling in the frost had become aware of her existence, and awareness, in Dominic Ross's world, was a sentence. He had activated every network he controlled. He had spread her description through the city like a virus spreading through a closed system. 5 days earlier, he did not know she existed. Now, he would move heaven and earth to find her. And he never let anyone walk away. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone you love and subscribe so you don't miss what unfolds next. Now, let us go back to the beginning. Let us return to 5 days earlier, when Valentina Voss had $5 to her name and 10 days to find $300,000. 5 days. That is how long she has left. The debt collector's letter sits on the passenger seat of her 2006 Honda Civic, which is parked behind a Philadelphia homeless shelter on a street where the city seems to have given up. The letter is stamped in red letters that look like dried blood, final notice. The words underneath are printed in font so large that she does not even need to open the envelope to know what they say, because she has read them 100 times already. $300,000. She owes $300,000 to the hospital where her daughter was treated for cancer 5 years ago, and the statute of limitations on the debt is almost expired, which means this is their last attempt to get blood from a stone, and stones do not bleed. She has $5 left. $5. Not 500. Not 50. 5. Valentina sits in the driver's seat with her hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, the position of someone waiting in traffic, except the car is parked and the engine is off because she is rationing the fuel in the tank. Outside the window, the city is grey. October fading into November. The trees are losing their leaves like they are shedding skin. She wears a thermal undershirt with a grey hoodie over it and a coat that someone left behind at the diner where she used to work, before the diner closed, before the owner decided he could not afford to keep her on staff anymore, before the bottom fell through for the 5th time in a row. The backpack sits in the back seat. Navy blue. Frayed at the straps. It contains 3 changes of clothes, a sleeping bag with a tear in one corner that she duct-taped shut, a toothbrush, a phone charger that no longer works, a photograph of her daughter Iris from 8 years ago, dark curly hair, gap-toothed smile, 8 years old and already fighting a war inside her own body. The cancer took her in the end, took her slowly, took her in a hospital room where Valentina worked 3 jobs and still could not afford the insurance, still went into debt that snowballed like a stone rolling downhill, gathering weight, gathering momentum, until the weight was too much and the stone crushed everything it touched. Valentina reaches into her jacket pocket and pulls out the $5. It is a crumpled bill with a tear in one corner. Lincoln's face looks depressed on the bill, like even a president understands that $5 is nothing. She can buy gasoline. Or food. Not both. She has chosen food every day this week, has chosen to feel the pinch of hunger rather than the panic of being stranded. But the gas tank is nearly empty and the choice is becoming binary. The shelter behind her has a phone number painted on the side in white letters. They give out free breakfast from 7 to 9 in the morning. She has not eaten breakfast there in 2 weeks because the shame of standing in line and seeing the other residents recognize her, the slow dawning realization that she is one of them now, that she has joined the category of human beings that society has categorized as disposable, the shame has been too much to bear. But the shame feels smaller than hunger. Hunger is growing teeth. She starts the engine. The car coughs like it is clearing its throat, a sound that has been getting worse every week. The mechanic at the corner shop told her 3 months ago that the engine is dying. Maybe another 6 months, he said, his voice kind in a way that made it worse. Maybe another year if you're lucky. She has no money for a new car, no credit for a loan, no future in which owning a car seems like anything but a cruel joke. When this car dies, she will have no way to sleep with a roof over her head, because the back seat of a car is the only shelter she has left. She drives toward the city. The radio is broken, so she drives in silence, and the silence is so complete that she can hear every rattle in the chassis, every grinding of the brakes, every terrible sound the car makes to let her know it is dying. The streets of Philadelphia are crowded even at this hour, even in the cold. People in expensive coats, people with places to be, people who have not slept in their cars. She passes them like she is invisible, which she has discovered is both a curse and a mercy. Invisible people are dangerous people, people with nothing to lose. The Mario's Pizzeria is on Broad Street, sandwiched between a payday loan place and a laundromat. The owner is a man named Marcus who hired her 3 weeks ago because he is the kind of man who says yes without asking many questions. He pays her $4.50 an hour cash at the end of each shift, and he lets her eat the leftover pizza that did not sell, the crusts that customers abandoned, the slices with the wrong toppings. He does not ask why she lives in her car. He simply nods when she comes in at 2 in the afternoon and leaves at 11 at night, her hair smelling like oregano and garlic and wood-fired smoke. Tonight she will deliver pizzas. She will drive someone else's car, not her own, because Mario will not let her use the dying Honda because he is afraid it will break down and she will lose an order and he will lose money. He has given her the keys to a 12-year-old white van with Mario's Pizzeria painted on the side in red letters. She will navigate the neighborhoods of Philadelphia where the houses are stacked on top of each other like teeth in a crowded mouth, where the streets are named for numbers and directions, where entire families live in spaces that feel like they are running out of air. She will deliver a pizza to someone in a warm house. That person will smell like dinner and family and safety. That person will open the door and see her standing in the cold, a woman in a grease-stained jacket, and sometimes they will tip her and sometimes they will close the door without meeting her eyes. Either way, she will feel the gravity of her invisibility pulling her down, making her smaller, making her less. She needs to eat something before her shift starts. The $5 is looking smaller every moment she thinks about it. The $5 bills trembled in Valentina Voss's frozen fingers as she sat in the driver's seat of her 1998 Honda Civic, parked behind the Kensington Avenue shelter where she had slept for the last 93 nights. December wind tore through a crack in the passenger window she could not afford to fix, and the sound of it, a high, whistling shriek like something dying slowly, filled the small metal box that had become her entire world. Her breath came out in white clouds that fogged the windshield, and she watched the fog appear and disappear with each exhale, counting her breaths the way she counted everything now. 1, 2, 3. Every number was a small prayer that time would move faster, that tomorrow would be kinder, that the letter in her backpack would somehow transform into something other than a death sentence. The letter was stamped final notice in letters so red they looked like blood. $300,000. 10 days remaining. The debt collector had written the numbers with such precision, each digit sharp and final, as if the pen itself was delivering a blade between her ribs. 3 years ago, her mother had gotten sick. Cancer. The kind that does not ask permission before it destroys everything a person has built. Valentina had sold her apartment. She had sold her car, her real car, not this dying Honda that rattled like a skeleton when it moved. She had sold her mother's jewelry, her mother's books, the small things that meant everything because they were all that remained. The hospital bills had kept coming. The surgery costs had kept climbing. Insurance had run out. Mercy had run out. And then her mother had run out of time. Now the bills were Valentina's alone, transferred to her like a curse that could not be erased. She opened her hand and looked at the $5 bills. The edges were worn soft from handling. One bill had a coffee stain across Alexander Hamilton's face. These $5 represented everything she had left in the world that was liquid, that could be exchanged for food or gas or another night in a shelter where the radiators clanked and the bathroom smelled like bleach and despair. She had done the math so many times that the numbers had burned themselves into her brain like a brand. $70 a night if she was lucky with tips at the restaurant. $50 if she was not. 12-hour shifts. 6 days a week. That meant roughly $420 if the tips cooperated, if the weather stayed decent, if her borrowed car did not break down and trap her on some frozen overpass where no one would find her until spring. $420 a month would not cover $300,000 in 10 days. The math had never worked. It had never worked from the moment she received the letter, and it would never work, and this was the kind of fact that transformed slowly into something like acceptance. Acceptance was not peace. Acceptance was simply the moment when you stopped fighting and started preparing for the fall. She needed to eat something before her shift started at the restaurant. The owner, Mario, had hired her 3 weeks ago because he was the kind of man who said yes without asking many questions. He paid her $4.50 an hour in cash at the end of each shift, and he let her eat the leftover pizza that did not sell, the crusts that customers abandoned, the slices with the wrong toppings. He did not ask why she lived in her car. He simply nodded when she came in at 2 in the afternoon and left at 11 at night, her hair smelling like oregano and garlic and wood-fired smoke that would not wash out no matter how many times she stood under the shelter's weak shower spray. Tonight she would deliver pizzas. She would drive Mario's van, the white one with Mario's Pizzeria painted on the side in faded red letters, because he would not let her use the Honda anymore. He was afraid it would break down and she would lose an order and he would lose money, which meant his fear was really just mathematics dressed up as kindness. The van was 12 years old and smelled like stale cheese and engine oil, but it started every time, and that made it worth infinitely more than her own car could ever be. She pulled the keys from her jacket pocket, a grey thing that had belonged to someone else before it belonged to her, and it still had that previous owner's name stitched into the collar in careful letters, Margaret, and stepped out into the cold. The wind hit her like a physical thing, like a blade wrapped in ice, and her body responded with an involuntary shudder that started in her shoulders and traveled down her spine. She locked the Honda, even though locking it seemed like a gesture at a funeral, beautiful and pointless, and walked the 3 blocks to Mario's Pizzeria, her shoes slapping against sidewalks that glistened with frozen rain. The restaurant was bright and warm, and the contrast made her eyes water. The ovens burned at temperatures that could melt stone, and the heat from them rolled outward in waves that made the air shimmer like it was underwater. Mario stood behind the counter, a man of 62 years with flour in his hair and a wedding ring that he twisted constantly, the way people twist things when they are nervous or thinking or both. He looked up when she came in, and something in his face shifted, not disgust, never disgust, but something like the small pain of recognizing that the world was not kind. "You are early," he said. His voice was the voice of someone who had spent 40 years speaking over the noise of ovens and customers and the general chaos of feeding people. It was a voice that had learned to be heard. "I wanted to help with prep," Valentina said. It was not true. She wanted to eat something before her shift, and she was too proud to ask directly, so she had learned to frame hunger as helpfulness, the way people frame many things they are ashamed to need. Mario nodded. He was good at understanding the grammar of shame. He gestured toward the kitchen, where 2 rectangular pizzas sat cooling on the counter, their edges dark and blistered from the heat. "Those did not sell. They are yours. Eat them in the back before you start deliveries." She took the pizzas to the back room, where cardboard boxes were stacked in towers that reached toward the ceiling, and she sat on an overturned crate and ate them slowly, trying to make each slice last longer than it did. The cheese was still warm. The crust was still soft. For the 13 minutes that the pizza remained in her mouth, she was not a woman with $5 and 10 days and a letter from a debt collector. She was simply someone eating dinner, and that small transformation, that brief escape into the ordinary, was almost enough to make her feel human again. At exactly 6:47 in the evening, the phone on the wall rang. Mario answered it, listened, and then called out her name. She stood up, brushing crumbs from her jeans, and came to take the receiver from his hand. The caller was a customer in a neighborhood called Fishtown, 3 blocks from the river, in a house stacked on top of 3 other houses like teeth in a crowded mouth. 1 large pepperoni. 1 order of wings. Delivery to 1247, Mercer Street. She wrote the address on the delivery slip, memorized it in the way she had learned to memorize things, by repeating it in her head like a prayer, and went to the van. The streets of Philadelphia were dark and wet. Snow had started to fall again, not heavy, but steady, the kind of snow that accumulated so slowly you did not notice until you looked behind yourself and saw that the whole world had turned white. She drove the van carefully, aware of its age, aware of how much it cost to repair things, aware that breakdowns were luxuries she could not afford. The roads were empty at this hour. Other people were home eating warm food with their families. Other people had homes. The delivery took her through neighborhoods where the houses were dark and the windows showed the blue glow of televisions, where people lived in spaces that felt like enough, like they had room to breathe. She found the address, rang the bell, and waited in the cold while someone moved behind the frosted glass of the door. A man opened it, middle-aged, wearing a sweater, and behind him she could see a living room where a child sat on the floor with toy blocks. The man did not meet her eyes when she handed him the pizza. He gave her a $5 bill. She said thank you. He closed the door. She stood on the porch for a moment, holding the $5 bill in her hand. It looked identical to the ones already in her pocket. 5 plus 5 equals 10. $10 toward 300,000. In another 399,990 hours of this, standing on porches while people did not meet her eyes, holding $5 bills, doing mathematics that did not end in anything but the same answer, she might survive. Then her phone buzzed. The old Nokia that Mario had given her, the one with the cracked screen and a battery that lasted exactly 4 hours before it died. A text message appeared on the screen. Unknown number. Unknown voice. The message said, "You need to call this number immediately. This is legal notice that your assets are subject to liquidation and wage garnishment. You have 9 days remaining." Her hand went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the December wind. She walked back to the van on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else, someone made of water instead of blood, and she sat in the driver's seat and stared at the message. 9 days. The letter had said 10. The countdown was accelerating. She did not call the number. She simply deleted the message and started the engine, and the van moved forward through the dark streets, carrying her toward the next delivery, the next $5, the next small lie she would tell herself about tomorrow being different than today. She did not know that in exactly 3 hours and 14 minutes, her entire life would change. She did not know that a black SUV convoy would break down on a frozen highway overpass, or that a man named Dominic Rossi would step out into the snow and see her sitting frozen behind a steering wheel, or that he would extend a hand into the darkness with a voice like thunder asking if she needed help. She did not know that saying yes to that hand would mean saying yes to everything else, to a world of blood feuds and buried secrets, to violence disguised as protection, to a kind of love that tasted like ash and redemption mixed together. She only knew that she had $5 and 10 days and a debt collector who was counting down time like a judge reading a sentence. She only knew that she was cold, and that the roads ahead were dark, and that somewhere in this city, Dominic Rossi was driving through the same winter storm, moving toward the moment when their lives would collide like two cars on a frozen overpass, neither one able to stop, both of them about to discover what it meant to fall completely and have someone stand underneath to catch you. The leather seat wrapped around her like a second skin, warm and foreign, and Valentina sat perfectly still, afraid that any movement might shatter this moment into something less real. Outside the tinted windows of Dominic's SUV, the frozen highway stretched ahead, mile markers disappearing into white static. The heater roared. Her fingers burned as feeling crept back into them, that painful tingling of blood returning to places it had abandoned hours ago. Rocco drove. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Sal sat in the front passenger seat, turned slightly sideways, watching her the way a man watches a loaded weapon that might go off without warning. Neither of them had spoken since she climbed into the vehicle. The silence was not empty, it was full of questions, suspicion, calculation. Dominic sat beside her. Close enough that she could smell the cologne on his chest, something dark and expensive like cedar and smoke. He wore a black cashmere coat that cost more than 3 months of her car payments. His hands were perfectly still, resting on his thighs. One hand bore a gold signet ring the size of a small stone. The other bore a silver band scarred with what looked like a bullet wound. 3 miles passed. 5. The storm outside began to soften, the snow falling less frantically. "What is your name?" His voice came suddenly, deep and solid like an oath carved into stone. "Valentina," she said. The word came out smaller than she intended. "Valentina Voss." He nodded once. A single tilt of his head that meant he was cataloging the information, filing it away in whatever part of his mind kept track of the people who mattered. Where were you going? Delivery job. Downtown warehouse. They needed something picked up at 3 in the morning. She did not mention the $16 the job would pay. She did not mention that $16 plus the $5 in her backpack would make $21 total, and she needed to stretch that across for more days until the next shift at Salvatore's. She certainly did not mention the letter. Your car broke down, he said. Not a question. Radiator hose. Engine overheated maybe 2 miles back. I tried to coast to an exit, but the steering got heavy and I parked. She was rambling. She made herself stop. He listened without interrupting. That was the thing she would remember later, that he did not interrupt, did not dismiss, did not speak until she had finished speaking. In her experience, powerful men used words like weapons, cutting people off mid-sentence. Dominic simply let her talk until there was nothing left to say. When they turned off the highway, she recognized the neighborhood. Old Philadelphia money lived here. Streets lined with brownstones and restaurants with single names on discreet brass plaques. The SUV pulled to a stop in front of Salvatore's, an upscale Italian restaurant with a valet stand and windows that glowed warm against the February darkness. Dominic turned to her. His eyes were storm gray, the color of water before it froze. A scar ran from below his left eye to his jawline, thin and white like a thread of old lightning. You will work here, he said. I will speak to the owner. Valentina stared. Why would you do that? Because I can. That was all he said. He stepped out of the SUV. Rocco and Sal followed. Through the window, she watched him move toward the restaurant entrance with the gait of a man who had never questioned whether a door would open for him. The next 3 days felt like a fever dream. The owner, a man named Giuseppe with silver hair and a permanent grimace, had given her a schedule without explanation. 10-hour shifts. $500 cash at the end of each night. She did not ask why. She did not ask how Dominic's conversation with Giuseppe had lasted exactly 4 minutes and somehow rewritten her entire immediate future. She worked carrying trays of hand-rolled pasta and wine glasses the size of small vases to tables filled with men in suits that cost more than everything she owned. The suits were always black or charcoal. The shirts were always white, opened at the collar to show chest hair and gold chains. The watches were always heavy, always gold, always worth more than her car had been worth before it died on the highway. The men stopped talking when she approached. They tracked her with their eyes the way predators track movement in tall grass. One of them, a man with a broken nose and a scar tissue, reached out and touched her wrist as she set down a plate. She did not flinch. She had learned long ago that flinching made things worse. She slept in her van in the parking lot behind the restaurant, curled in the back seat with her jacket rolled into a pillow. She washed her uniform in the restaurant bathroom sink, using the industrial hand soap and water as hot as her raw skin could tolerate. The reflection in the mirror showed a woman she barely recognized, sunken eyes, sharp cheekbones, hair that had not seen scissors in 4 months. She looked like a ghost of herself. Sometimes she wondered if she was already dead and simply hadn't realized it yet. Dominic came in twice. The first time was on the second night. She was carrying a tray of calamari when she saw him enter the private booth in the back, the one with velvet walls and a chandelier that cost probably as much as her mother's entire house had cost. Rocco and Sal sat across from him. They talked in voices too low to hear. Every few moments, one of them would glance in her direction, then look away. The second time was on the third night. She was leaving, stepping out into the alley behind the restaurant at 11:17 p.m. The kitchen had just closed. The trash needed to be taken out. The air smelled like rotting food and wet concrete and the particular silence that comes after midnight in a city block where nobody lives anymore, where the buildings just stand empty and watch. She opened the dumpster lid and threw in the garbage bag, the bottom of the bag tearing so that bits of pasta and vegetable scraps scattered onto the metal bottom with soft thuds. That was when she heard it. Not a sound, exactly. More like the absence of sound being interrupted. A small crying noise, thin and desperate like a kitten that had been locked in a closet and was only just now finding its voice. Valentina froze. She climbed onto a plastic crate, her heart suddenly moving too fast, and looked into the dumpster. Her eyes adjusted to the darkness. She saw newspaper, plastic containers, the usual detritus of a restaurant kitchen. Then she saw movement. A bundle. Wrapped in what looked like a blood-stained hospital blanket. Small enough to fit in her hands. The crying came again, weaker this time, almost like the sound was giving up. She reached in and lifted the bundle carefully, cradling it against her chest the way she had seen mothers cradling their babies in the waiting room of the clinic where her own mother had received treatment. The baby was ice cold. Ribs visible through translucent skin. A hospital identification bracelet on one impossibly thin wrist. The bracelet said Oliver. The bracelet said St. Mary's Medical Center. The bracelet said the date was 1 week ago. She ran. Through the kitchen door. Past the prep stations. Past Giuseppe, who was counting register receipts. She screamed without meaning to scream, the sound just tore out of her throat like something trying to escape her body. Call 911. Someone call 911. Now. Please. A waitress dropped a tray of wine glasses. They shattered on the tile floor with a sound like a chandelier falling. Giuseppe stared. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Dominic appeared from the private booth in the back. He saw the bundle. He saw her holding it. His face changed in a way that was almost imperceptible to anyone who was not watching closely. A tightening around the eyes. A slight hardening of the jaw. His entire body seemed to shift into focus. He walked toward her with absolute stillness, each movement controlled and deliberate. When he reached her, he extended his hands. Give him to me. She placed the baby in his arms. Dominic looked down at the small face. His expression became something she had no words for. Pain and love and rage all happening simultaneously, each one fighting for dominance in his eyes. He lifted the hospital bracelet and read the name. Oliver, he said quietly. His voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. My son. The room went dead silent. The kind of silence where you could hear the hum of the refrigerators in the kitchen. Where you could hear the rain against the windows. Where you could hear your own heartbeat in your ears. Rocco stood up so fast his chair fell backward. Sal's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again without producing sound. In 15 years, Rocco whispered to Sal, though his eyes never left his boss, I have never seen him like this. Dominic carried Oliver to the private booth, moving with the careful steps of a man carrying something infinitely fragile. He laid the child on the leather seat and wrapped him in his own coat, the cashmere that cost more than her first month's rent. His hand shook slightly as he tucked the blanket around the tiny body. He called a number. Spoke 3 words. Come now. Oliver? The person on the other end apparently understood, because he hung up before receiving any explanation. While they waited, Valentina sat across from him at the booth table. Dominic did not look at her. He kept one hand on his son's chest, feeling him breathe, reassuring himself that the small lungs were still working. His mother died 6 months ago, Dominic said, each word coming out carefully, like he was teaching a lesson he had already had to teach and did not want to teach again. Childbirth complications. She was not my wife. She was. I protected her. When she died, I placed Oliver with a family I trusted. They owed me everything. Everything. Someone took him from that house and left him to die in a restaurant dumpster. Who would do this? Valentina asked. His eyes became black glass. I will find out. A doctor arrived within 20 minutes. A man with silver hair and a black medical bag who clearly had received a call like this before from people like Dominic. He examined Oliver quickly, professionally, checked vital signs and reflexes and temperature. His diagnosis was pneumonia from cold exposure and severe hypothermia, but the baby's heart rate was strong. "He will make it," the doctor said. "Keep him warm. I will return tomorrow with antibiotics." Dominic did not let go of his son's hand. An hour later, sitting alone with her at the table while Rocco stayed with Oliver and Sal stood guard outside, Dominic asked her a question that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. "Why did you save him?" "Because no one else moved," she said. "You have nothing," he said. "Why risk yourself for a child you have never met?" She met his eyes. "I know what it is like to have nothing. That is why I do not walk past people who need help." For the first time, Dominic smiled. It was small and sad and absolutely real. In that smile, she saw something beneath the power, beneath the fear, beneath the scars. She saw a man who had lost everything and thought he would never find anything again. "Tell me your story," he said. And she did. She told him about her mother's cancer diagnosis 3 years ago. She told him about the chemotherapy that cost $197,000. She told him about the surgery that cost $143,000. She told him about her mother dying anyway, and the hospital billing department sending letters with red stamps that said final notice. She told him she had $300,000 in medical debt. She told him she had 10 days to pay it. She told him she had $5 in her backpack. She said the numbers twice, needing him to understand the geometry of her desperation. $300,000. I wash dishes for $70 a night. The math does not work. Dominic listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he said 4 words, "I will pay it." Valentina recoiled as if he had struck her. "Why would you do that? I am nobody." "You saved my son," Dominic said. "That makes you everything." What she did not know was that 2 people were already planning to destroy her. For days later, the parking lot behind the restaurant sits empty except for Valentina's car, a rusted Honda with a check engine light that has been burning for 6 months. She finishes her shift at 11:19 p.m., her apron still damp with spilled wine and someone else's regret. Her feet ache. Her ribs ache from where she has been sleeping on the shelter's metal cots. She counts her tips as she walks, $18.35. She pulls her coat tighter. The November wind cuts through the fabric like a blade wrapped in ice. She does not see Anthony Marchetti step out of the shadows between the dumpsters until he is already moving toward her. He is 28 years old but carries himself like someone much older, someone who has spent his whole life learning how to hurt people and enjoying the lesson. His uncle is Carmine Marchetti, and in the world of Philadelphia crime, that name still means something. But Anthony has never believed in earning respect. He prefers to take it. "I told you I would see you again," he says. His voice is smooth like oil on water, beautiful and toxic. Valentina turns to run. She makes it for steps before Rocco and Sal step out from behind the cars on either side. She is trapped between them like a bird in a closing fist. "Please," she says. "I do not have anything. I do not know anything." "You know Dominic Rossi," Anthony says, and he smiles. It is not a smile that reaches his eyes. Nothing good has ever reached Anthony Marchetti's eyes. He hits her across the face, and her vision explodes into white. She tastes blood, copper and salt and the flavor of broken teeth that are somehow still attached, hanging loose against her gum. She tries to scream. The second hit comes faster. Her knees buckle. The concrete rises up to meet her, and her palms scrape open against the rough asphalt, blood seeping into the cracks. Anthony grabs her by the throat. His hand is large and warm, and it squeezes until the world begins to shrink to the size of a pinhole. Until there is no air. Until there is nothing but the pressure and the burning in her lungs and the thought that this is how it ends, not in a hospital bed like her mother, not in a shelter, but in a parking lot behind a restaurant where she washed dishes for $70 a night. "Tell Dominic Rossi," Anthony hisses, his breath stinking of expensive whiskey and cigarettes rolled by hand in Havana, "that if he does not hand over his shipping routes by tomorrow night at midnight, I will kill you slowly." I will make it last 3 days. I will make sure he can hear you screaming from wherever he is hiding. Do you understand? She cannot nod. She cannot speak. She can only stare at the rage in his eyes and understand that he means every word. He releases her. She collapses to the ground, gasping, her lungs burning like they are filling with fire instead of air. He kicks her ribs once, twice, and something inside her cracks or breaks or both. Then he is gone. His footsteps fade. An engine starts somewhere in the darkness. Tires crunch gravel. Silence returns like a curse that cannot be lifted. Valentina lies on the cold asphalt for 7 minutes. She counts them because counting keeps her from screaming. Then she drags herself to her car, every movement a calculation of pain. Left elbow up. Right hip forward. Breathe through the broken places. She locks the doors behind her and sits in the driver's seat with the engine off, the darkness wrapping around her like a burial shroud. She tilts the rearview mirror toward her face. One eye is completely swollen shut, purple and black like an old bruise, like a storm that has set up permanent residence on her cheekbone. The other eye stares back at her, hollow and afraid. Her lip is split open. Handprints circle her throat like a necklace made of violence. Blood has dried in her hair. She looks like a ghost, like someone already dead, like a candle in the wind that has been extinguished and is still smoking. She pulls the debt collector's letter from her backpack. The paper is worn now from being folded and unfolded 100 times. The red stamp reads final notice. $300,000. 5 days remain. And she laughs. It is a sound like breaking glass, like a prayer that came back unanswered. It does not matter anymore. Anthony Marchetti will kill her before the deadline. Or if he does not, Dominic's world will swallow her whole, and she will spend whatever time she has left looking over her shoulder, waiting for the next shadow to move. She pulls a pen from her jacket pocket and a napkin from the glove compartment. Her hands shake so badly she can barely grip the pen. The first line takes her 30 seconds to write. 3 words, I am leaving. She writes for 11 minutes. She tells him that she is getting on a bus tonight, that she is leaving Philadelphia and changing her name, that she will disappear into some small town where no one knows her face and no one knows what she did. She tells him that he saved her life when no one else would, that his kindness was the most dangerous thing that ever happened to her because it made her forget the fundamental rule of her existence, do not matter to anyone, because it only hurts when they have to choose between saving you and saving themselves. She tells him that Oliver deserves a father who is not distracted, a man who can keep his attention on the empire instead of wasting it on a nobody. She writes his name carefully, the letters shaking, Oliver. He is 5 years old. He draws pictures of airplanes and dinosaurs and asks questions about why the sky is blue. He asked her once, "Why are you so sad?" and she did not know how to explain that some sadness lives in your bones so deep you cannot reach it. Her hand trembles as she writes the last lines. She tells him that she fell in love with him the moment he knelt beside her in the frost and let her see the fear beneath the armor, the evidence that underneath all the power and all the scars, he was just a man who was afraid of losing one more person. She folds the letter into thirds. It is soaked through with her tears now, the ink running in places, but the words are still readable if someone holds it up to the light. She will leave it at the restaurant. Someone will find it. Someone will give it to him. She reaches for the ignition. That is when she hears it through the cracked window, sirens. Not police, not fire, but an ambulance, and it is screaming through the parking lot toward the restaurant's back entrance. People are shouting. She can hear Rocco's voice, thick with panic, "Get him in the car. Get him to St. Mary's. Get him now. Oliver." She sits motionless for 3 seconds. Her hand hovers over the ignition key. She should start the engine. She should drive. She should disappear like she promised herself she would. This is not her problem. This is not her life. She is a nobody, and nobodies do not matter, and they do not stay, and they do not risk themselves for other people's children. But then she remembers the look on Dominic's face when he knelt beside her in the frozen dark and asked, "Are you hurt?" She remembers the feel of his coat around her shoulders. She remembers Oliver's hand in hers the day she taught him to count to 10, and he only got to 5 before he got confused and started laughing. She pulls the letter out of her jacket. She rips it in half. Then she opens the car door. Inside the restaurant, the kitchen is empty. The dining room smells like garlic and rosemary and something else underneath, something chemical and wrong. Oliver was seized at table, mid-bite of his pasta, his body going rigid and then convulsing, his eyes rolling back until only the whites showed. Dominic scooped him up and ran. The ambulance was called at 11:58 p.m. By 11:59, Dominic's black SUV convoy was racing through empty streets toward St. Mary's Hospital with Oliver unconscious in his father's arms. But Rocco and Sal remained. They stood in the dining room watching the EMTs pack up their equipment, watching the stunned waiters cleaning broken plates from the floor. They are still standing there when Valentina stumbles through the back door, her face a map of violence, her eye swollen shut, her throat marked with handprints like a signature of rage. Rocco sees her first. His hand moves toward the gun at his hip before his brain catches up to what his eyes are telling him. He moves toward her instead, his large frame bending down to meet her eyes. "Who did this?" he asks. His voice is gentle. Rocco is not usually gentle. Rocco is the man who handles things that need to be handled, and gentle is not part of his vocabulary. But something about the way she is standing, like she might fall over if someone removed one crucial piece of her structure, makes him gentle anyway. "Anthony Marchetti," Valentina whispers. Speaking makes her throat scream. He said if you do not give him the shipping routes by midnight tomorrow, he will." Sal is already on his phone. 2 steps away, his voice is cold and businesslike. It is Sal. "We found him. The Marchetti nephew just marked himself for execution." He listens to the response. His jaw tightens. He is with Oliver. St. Mary's. Seizure. We do not have information yet on the severity. He hangs up. The silence that follows is the silence of men who understand that the world is about to change shape. "Sit down," Rocco says to Valentina. "Do not move. Do not speak to anyone. You are not here. You understand?" She nods. Rocco pulls out his phone and makes one call. 30 seconds of listening. Then, we have Oliver at the hospital. And we have Marchetti at a warehouse on the Delaware. You choose. I will handle both. The response must be clear because Rocco nods and puts the phone away. He looks at Valentina with something that might be pity, might be respect, might be the look a man gives to someone who has just become a weapon in a war they did not start. "Stay here," he says. "When this is over, Dominic will want to see you." At 2:03 a.m., 12 men in black tactical gear move through the darkness like a tide of ink. They do not speak. They do not need to. They have done this before. The warehouse on the Delaware is old, built in 1987, all exposed brick and reinforced steel and windows that have been boarded up so thoroughly that the inside might as well be a tomb. Anthony Marchetti sits in the office on the 3rd floor, counting cash. He has been counting cash for the last 4 hours, trying to calm himself down, trying to convince himself that Dominic Rossi will fold because that is what powerful men do when you threaten to kill someone they care about. The door explodes inward. The explosion comes from a shaped charge, professional grade, military precision. Dust billows into the room. Anthony scrambles for the gun on the desk, but Dominic is already there, moving through the smoke like a ghost, like a weapon, like a prayer that came back as vengeance. Rocco and Sal flank him. Behind them, 10 more men, all with weapons, all with the 1,000-yard stare of people who have accepted that they might not leave this building alive and have made peace with the mathematics of it. Anthony backs against the wall, trembling like a cornered animal, like a thing that realizes too late that it has wandered into a cage with something far more dangerous than itself. I did not know," he begins. "She is just some girl," Dominic finishes, his voice calm, measured, deep and solid like an oath carved in stone. That is what you thought. That is what you believed. You believed she was nobody, and therefore disposable. You learned tonight that you were wrong. He steps closer. Anthony tries to raise the gun. Sal's shot is faster. The gun clatters to the floor, smoking, useless. I will not kill you, Dominic says quietly. Death is too quick. Too easy. Too merciful for someone who put his hands on what is mine. He makes one phone call. The voice on the other end is a man he has known for 11 years, a Federal Bureau of Investigation contact, a man whose mortgage and children's tuition Dominic has been funding through carefully laundered shell corporations. One sentence, warehouse on the Delaware. 3rd floor. The entire Mochetti operation is documented and ready. I am sending you everything. The FBI raid comes at dawn. 30 agents in tactical gear. Anthony is dragged out of a holding cell in the warehouse basement, still bleeding from where Rocco's fist has broken his nose, still screaming his uncle's name like a prayer. The federal charges are precise and devastating: racketeering across 3 states, extortion, attempted murder, loan sharking, illegal firearms trafficking. The prosecutor asks for 40 years minimum. The judge agrees. By the time the sun reaches the horizon, the Mochetti family empire is collapsing like a tower built on sand. Every warehouse seized. Every shipping route frozen. Every ally scattered like roaches when the light comes on. Anthony's uncle, Carmine Mochetti, watches from his living room as federal agents execute warrants on 7 properties simultaneously. By noon, he is crying. By evening, he has lawyered up and is preparing to testify against his own family to avoid a 25-year sentence. Victoria Ashford wakes at 5:13 a.m. to the sound of her phone ringing. It is her lawyer. His voice is careful, measured, the voice of a man delivering a terminal diagnosis. Turn on the news, he says. She does. Her face is plastered across every major outlet in Pennsylvania. The headline reads, High Society philanthropist arrested in $2 million charity fraud scheme. The reporter stands outside a federal building, speaking with practiced sympathy about embezzlement, about funds meant for children with cancer being diverted to Victoria's personal accounts, about a woman who built an empire on the suffering of people she pretended to help. Someone leaked everything. Bank records, emails, witness statements. An anonymous source, and Victoria knows with absolute certainty, that it is Dominic, has given the authorities enough evidence to bury her. At 6:15 a.m., there is a knock on her door. She is still in her silk nightgown, her face unmarked by makeup, looking smaller and older without the armor of her wardrobe. The FBI agents do not apologize as they cuff her. They do not call her him. They treat her like what she is on a predator court. The trial lasts 6 weeks. Every moment is public. Every cruelty she ever committed is documented and displayed like exhibits in a museum of her own monstrosity. Her trial is national news. Talk shows dissect her psychology. Women she once called friends appear on camera to deny ever knowing her. Her penthouse is seized. Her art collection is liquidated. Her name becomes synonymous with corruption. 40 years in federal prison. She will be 83 when she is released, if she is released. But what Valentina does not know, as she sits in the hospital waiting room with Rocco beside her and the sound of machines beeping in the distance, is that Dominic has already made a decision. A decision about her. A decision about what comes next. And in the cardiac care unit on the 4th floor, Oliver opens his eyes. Valentina sits in the hospital chair beside Oliver's crib, watching the rise and fall of his small chest. The machines beep steadily, a rhythm like a heartbeat that is not hers. She has not slept in 36 hours. Her ribs are wrapped so tight she cannot take a full breath. When she moves, pain shoots through her like lightning. A soft knock. Dominic enters, still in yesterday's blood-stained suit, his tie loosened, his jaw dark with stubble. He looks at her the way a man looks at something he thought he had lost forever. He does not speak at first. He just sits in the chair across from her and pulls a napkin from his pocket. It is worn, creased from being folded and unfolded many times. Her handwriting is smudged across it, blue ink running where tears fell. "You wrote me a letter," Dominic says quietly. Valentina's breath catches. The napkin. She had left it in her car, wedged under the visor, a goodbye she thought no one would ever find. "You were not supposed to find that," she whispers. "I was leaving." "I know." Dominic leans forward, elbows on his knees, his massive frame bent like a man soothing a lost child. "I found it before the ambulance came. I read it 3 times. The machines beep. Somewhere down the hallway, a nurse calls out numbers. Oliver sleeps on, unaware that his father is breaking apart in the chair across the room. "You said you fell in love with me," Dominic continues, and his voice cracks like ice under weight. Valentina looks away, toward the window where dawn is just beginning to crack the sky open. "It does not matter. Your world is dangerous. I bring you nothing but. You bring me everything." The words come out raw, urgent, like a confession he has been holding in his chest for years. "You saved my son's life. You stood when everyone else froze. You wrote me a goodbye letter to protect me, even though I should be the one protecting you." He reaches across the small space between their chairs and takes her hand. She lets him. His palm is warm, calloused, solid as stone. "I paid your debt," Dominic says simply. Valentina turns to look at him. "What?" $300,000. "All of it. Gone. You are free." She stares at him, unable to move, unable to breathe past the wrapping around her ribs. "Why?" she asks. "Because you matter," Dominic says, and something in his chest settles, like a door closing on something he no longer needs to carry. "And because I am asking you to stay. Not as someone I rescued. As someone I choose." He pulls a small box from his pocket. Not a ring. A key, silver, catching the pale morning light. "This is to an apartment 3 blocks from here. It is yours. No strings. But if you are willing, I would like to see where this goes." Valentina's eyes fill with tears. She thinks of the car, the shelter, the $5 in an envelope that felt like the weight of the world. She thinks of kneeling in the frost beside this man, thinking he was nothing but danger. She thinks of the night Oliver stopped breathing and Dominic became helpless, and she stood up anyway. She nods. Dominic exhales like he has been holding his breath for days. Perhaps he has. 1 week later, Valentina stands in the upscale Italian restaurant where Dominic's father was murdered years ago. The space has been transformed, no longer a crime scene but a sanctuary. Frost glitters on the windows. Stars sharp as diamonds pierce the December sky. She wears a simple black dress, nothing expensive, nothing trying too hard. Just herself, clean and whole. Oliver sits in the private booth coloring with crayons, his small face concentrating on staying inside the lines. He is healthy now. The machines are gone. His laugh, when it comes, sounds like bells. Dominic enters through the main doors, and the room shifts. Staff members straighten. Conversations pause. He acknowledges no one. He walks only to Valentina, takes her hand, and kisses her knuckles like she is made of something precious. "Are you happy?" he asks. She smiles. For the first time in 6 months, in her entire life, perhaps, the answer comes easy. "I am getting there." He smiles back, and for the first time in 20 years, Dominic Rossi looks at peace. The scar that runs from his eye to his cheekbone seems less dark somehow. Or perhaps she is just learning to see past it, to the man underneath. Oliver runs to them and wraps his arms around Dominic's waist. Dominic lifts him, and the child rests his head on his father's shoulder, coloring with a crayon still in his hand. "Vivi," Oliver says, looking at Valentina with the clarity only children possess, "are you staying now?" "Yes, baby," Valentina says. "I am staying." The three of them stand together in the candlelit booth, a family built from ashes, from broken things, from a woman who had nothing and a man who learned that real strength is not found in power but in admitting need. 6 months ago, Valentina had $5 to her name and no future. She slept in a car that would not start. She washed her face in gas station bathrooms and counted every penny like it was blood. She thought strength meant never falling, never needing help, never breaking. She thought survival meant being invisible, small, worthless. But she learned something different in a frozen alley behind a restaurant. She learned it when she knelt beside a man who ruled an empire but could not save his own son. She learned it when she stood up, broken ribs and swollen eye and all, because someone needed her to. Real strength is not found in never falling. Real strength is in always standing back up, even when your eye is swollen shut, even when your ribs are broken, even when you have nothing left but the choice to move forward. Valentina found that strength in herself. And in doing so, she gave it to someone else. Dominic looks at her across the table, Oliver asleep against his shoulder, his small face peaceful. He mouths 2 words across the candlelight. "Thank you." Valentina smiles. Some debts are not paid in money. Some debts are paid in moments like this, quiet, candlelit, whole. They are paid in a child's laugh. They are paid in the absence of fear. They are paid in the choice to stay, to build, to love despite the cost. Outside, the December wind moves through Philadelphia's streets, but inside this booth, there is only warmth and the soft breathing of a sleeping child. The night deepens. The stars burn brighter. And in a city built on power and violence and money, 2 people who had nothing find everything. If this story reminded you that real strength is not found in never falling but in always standing back up, drop a like right now and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel because tomorrow we are bringing you another story that will shake you to your core. The people you love deserve to hear these tales, share this with them. And remember this, you are stronger than you know. You are capable of standing back up, no matter how many times you fall. We wish you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. No matter how hard life gets, remember that after the rain, the sky clears. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We will see you again in the next video.